Welcome. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is the Houston Atheists, an event with Ray Hill, and it is also co-sponsored by the Humanists of Houston. We're very happy to put together an evening of somebody I think you may already know. I really would take about 2 or 3 hours to go through all the stuff this man has done, so I'll let him do it on his own. I do want to say before we start, though, we're very happy to be patrons here and hope that you order some drinks. We're here at the kindness of the bar, and they're really nice people, and we hope that by buying drinks we make it well worth their effort to have us here in Habitat. My name is Jimmy McLaughlin. I'm the LGBT coordinator. Ray Hill. He's a co-founder of KPFT-FM. I think you may already know that. He's been the founder and past host of the Wildenstein Show, Prison Show, co-founder of what became the AIDS Foundation Houston, what became the GLBT Political Caucus. I could go on and on. He's a playwright. We don't have time, but he does. I'd like to introduce Ray Hill, King of the Montrose.
Now, I'm going to do a little role modeling. If you've got one of these things in your pocket, do as I do and put it on Shut the Fuck Up. I'm pleased to have a crowd of people to watch and listen. I'm sure most of you know me from reading the wanted posters at the post office, and that's a perfectly legitimate way to get to know me. Those things are usually pretty accurate. About other things, cops lie. Remember this if you get jury duty. All cops lie. Sometimes. Narcotics officers lie most of the time. Vice officers lie in every case, under oath. I don't even know why they bother to give oaths anymore, because if it's your case, you're going to start off lying because you're trying to protect and cover your ass. If it's anybody else's case, you're probably mad at them, so you're going to lie. The cops are going to lie, and the judges know all of that. The only people who don't know this lying is going on are the poor innocent jurors. So if you get on one of those panels, now's your chance to remember that Uncle Ray said they lie in trial, and get that sorted out with your fellow jurors. I'm a native Houstonian, and it may come as a shock to many of you, because you thought all gay men were young and good looking. And I do not exactly do that present. I did once. I was very young and I was very good looking. I was good looking enough to be the handsome man on Tennessee Williams' left elbow at all of the parties in New Orleans in the 60s. Now, I wasn't his sex partner. He liked sex partners being rougher than I was, but I was acceptable to be seen in public with, and his sex partners weren't. I understood that role for what it was. It was merely a decorative role. I was there because I was decorative. I was not there to open my mouth, because if I entered the repartee competition, I would not get invited to the next party. And I understood that, so I would sit there and smile as people like Tennessee Williams and Truman Capote tried to kill each other with repartee in a state of drunkenness that they both couldn't construct a complete sentence if their life depended on it, and it would have been so easy for sober Ray to get in there and just slaughter them. But if I did that, I would miss the next party. So there is something to be learned about constraints to reality. I understand, and I've got to be careful here, there are people in this room that I have known for more than 30 years. So I've got to be careful, because if I say something that is so far off base, they're going to throw a drink at me and say, "You're lying, mother," or whatever that is. And so I've got to be careful with that, and I'm careful with that wherever. And you need to know a little bit about my pre-birth background. Most atheists that I meet are first generation atheists. They come from families that were Pentecostal or Church of Christ, and boy, that's a recruiting operation for atheists if I've ever heard of one. Or some other belief system that is immersed in a lot of stuff, and they have to take refuge later in life in quieter waters, and so they become atheists. I am not. My mother, Frankie, I was raised in a family where these people weren't mommy and daddy. These people were real people, they had names. And I called my mother Frankie, and I called my father Raymond. And Frankie was a tailor, and her father was an atheist and a Marxist in Leon County, Texas, from before 1900. Of course, he could get away with that because he was also the physician. And if you're the physician, you get away with a lot of shit. And so Frankie was raised by a good Baptist woman, because apparently that's the only women available for this atheist doctor to marry. He married 2 of them. And between them he had 21 children. He was 4'11" tall, but he had something to prove, and well, you can follow it from there. Raymond, on the other hand, was a Hill. And it's impossible to follow the Hill bloodline too far back, because it wasn't until 1618 that the first Hill got married in a church. Previous Hills were skeptics. They would not have used the term atheists, they would use the term skeptics, but they weren't church people. And all birth, marriage, death records in England are church records. And so Hills did not exist as far as church records concerned until Starley got married to a Christian woman in an Episcopal church. But he converted her, and they proceeded to be skeptics after that. They were farmers. As a matter of fact, I am the first generation of Hill males that did not push a mule through a field for a living. And I take great pride. I know a lot about farming crap because I got it from my ancestors. The other thing I got from my ancestors, especially the Hills, is it is not worth the energy you burn to believe anything. So just be a skeptic, and you don't have to do all that extra work. So that came down to me, but it was a secret. They didn't tell me about that. Frankie had promised her mother, who was a good Baptist woman, that she would raise her children in church. So Frankie got up every Sunday morning and went to church. Now, we didn't do the Wednesday Bible study thing, and we didn't do the Sunday night service, but Frankie carried the children, me and my 2 sisters, to church every Sunday morning until my 13th birthday. And the first Sunday after my 13th birthday, I went bounding into the kitchen, dressed and ready to go to church. And Frankie was standing there in a robe with her foot propped up in an open oven door, smoking a cigarette, drinking coffee. And I said, "Aren't you going to church?" He said, "No. I promised my mother I would raise my children in church. You are no longer a child, and you're the last of them, my baby. You're now a teenager. You can go if you want to, but I'm never darkening the door, one of those dens of hypocrisy, for the rest of my life." And she didn't. I managed to get her to go to a demonstration at Second Baptist Church once. But we had to bury her in Bell Park because she didn't want her body in a church either. But I had to go because That was my social life. I knew all the kids in my Sunday school class. We'd run around together. We'd go swimming naked in Carpenter's Bayou together. We'd nuts around in the woods together. My sex life and my personal and social life was tied up in church. But you knew about the priests and the acolytes. See, I grew up thinking this was a Baptist thing. I didn't, you look a little vulnerable in the youth ministers all over you, and it's not just a priest thing. It's a religious thing. And if you're clever, you can seduce them, and they can make your life more comfortable in many ways. And I was good at that. But with Frankie not there to keep me in some kind of reality, the next thing you know, I am at 13 years old teaching my peers Sunday school lessons. And that was good, and I thought, I'm going to be good at whatever I do. So I memorized Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all of them, the 4 Gospels. Memorize it, so that I can do the chapter number and the verse number, and then quote the scriptures at length, holding the Bible above my head. That's pretty impressive for a 13-year-old. And I'm going to be a dramatist. Memory is just not a problem for me. For instance, I don't have any notes up here, and this delivery of this presentation is going to be same as other deliveries of this presentation, well, no matter how often I do it, so I remember this stuff. Well, the preacher saw that, and he thought that meant that I had been called to preach. So he said, would you teach Wednesday night adult Bible study? I said, sure, glad to. Where are you? He said, the 19th chapter of Matthew. So I knew every word in the 19th chapter of Matthew, but I went and studied it again to be sure. What's in there? Divorce is in there. Eunuchs are in there. There's a whole bunch of stuff. It's X-rated, this 19th chapter of Matthew. And I've got to teach the meaning of this to adults when I'm 13 years old. And it's not just adults. He goes out and scrapes up 3 more Baptist preachers to come in and watch this Bible study class. So I get started and I go through, and then we get to chapter 19, verses 10 through 12. For this message is not for everyone, but let those for whom it is intended receive it. For there are eunuchs who are eunuchs from their mother's womb, and there are eunuchs who are made eunuchs by men, and there are eunuchs who choose to be eunuchs for the glory of the kingdom. Get your Bibles out. You can follow me. It's word for word. And then it closes off. That message is not intended for everybody, but let those for whom it is written receive it. It's all in red letters. Well, what the fuck does that mean? There were eunuchs who were eunuchs from their mother's womb. It's like prenatal castration. Right? And how do you do that? Physically. How do you, without losing the water thing, get up in there and do prenatal castration? It just doesn't work. So maybe eunuchs does not mean what everybody accepts eunuchs to mean. Maybe it's the word, not the idea. But then there are eunuchs who are made eunuchs. I can follow it, made by men. I can follow that. And then there are eunuchs who choose to be. And none of this is negative. So if you want to be a eunuch as far as Jesus Christ is concerned, knock your lights out, baby. Any way you get there, it's fine with me. Make yourself comfortable. Make it happen. It's okay. Trying to teach that when you're 13 years old to a bunch of adults who have preconceived notions about that and probably didn't even read the text before they got to the Bible study. But I handled it delicately, and I made it through the evening, and when it was over, I had a meeting with the 4 pastors present, and they said, "When did you realize you had the calling?" Well, I didn't know what the fuck that was. I had never had the realization that I had the calling. But then they started about traveling. They started about getting audiences. They started talking about making money. And all of a sudden, I began to hear a faint call somewhere out there. But I had the Frankie problem. I had to go sell this. I'm 13 years old. Can I repeat that? I'm 13. I had to go convince Frankie, who had already told me she didn't believe in this crap, that I'm going to go on the road and be a preacher. Now, how is that going to sell at home? So the deal was, okay, you can try this if you want to, in this egalitarian family we have. But if you think you're going to embarrass yourself, come home. Just come home. Give it up. So at age 13, I began preaching. Youth revivals. Started in Pasadena, went to Deer Park, went to Cleveland, went to Corrigan. I worked the Highway 59 circuit, all the way to the Louisiana border, preaching youth revivals, which got longer and longer, and I'm still in school. In 1956, I made $70,000, paid taxes on it, personal income in 1956 dollars. That's almost $500,000. 16-year-old kid. Preaching. Revivals. Couple of months. In East Texas. Blow into town, hold a news conference. Talk to the local media. Preach Wednesday night. My idea was to build a crowd. Preach Thursday night. Preach Friday night. Saturday morning, go to the church, hold Bible study and Sunday school with all the various classes of various ages right there on the grounds. Church ladies in East Texas can cook some mighty fine food. I won't tell you about that. Eat all the fried chicken. What they say about Baptist preachers and fried chicken, it's true. No doubt about it. And they got some good fried chicken in East Texas. It's still got red, mud, dirt on it, but it's good chicken. Soil's rich, vegetables are good, fresh off the farm. And what I got paid was what got in the collection plate on Sunday. So my routine was to build over the week for the maximum attendance on Sunday. And whatever came in the collection plate was mine. And I would leave after Sunday morning service with a valise full of cash money. And I'd put it in my bank and report it and pay taxes on it. I did that consistently until I was 17 years old. And then I had a booking in Colemanile, Texas. It's a little town between Woodville and Lufkin on Highway 69. It's not really a town, it's an intersection. There's a little Baptist church there. And as I left for Wednesday press conference and Wednesday night service as a junior at Galena Park High School, I told Frankie and Ronan that this is probably the last little church where I would be preaching, because I had been booked at First Baptist in Crockett, which was a Southern Baptist Convention church. The other churches up until that point I had preached in were missionary and independent Baptist churches where the preacher usually owned the building and he put the collection plate in his pocket, and if you asked him how much that was, it was a big church state issue. And we thought if you had a convention, you may as well have a pope. We were the real Baptists, and they were wild-eyed, nearly Methodist kind of people, not to be trusted, but they were a lot richer than we were. And I was going to make a lot more money doing places like the First Baptist Church up in East Texas. But something funny happened Friday night. We packed the church on Wednesday. We had to have folding chairs brought in on Thursday. And on Friday, we really expected the crowd to exceed the capacity of the building. So the pastor suggested that I stay at the deacon's house until after the last hymn was sung. And then I come in and come up the center aisle and take the dais and preach. They wanted to know what I was going to preach about, and I was going to give those Baptists the Lutheran plan of salvation. Now, the Baptist plan of salvation is for whoso, John 3:16, for whoso believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. The Lutheran plan doesn't come from the Gospels. It comes from Ephesians. For by grace are ye saved, not through works, lest anyone should boast. Well, it's actually any man should boast, but I always cleaned up the sexism because most of the people I was talking to was women. And I wanted to get them secured in. And I had not memorized Ephesians, but I read it a lot in preparation for that sermon. And so, as I was coming into the church, a squall line, that's at Weatherfront in Ed, the weatherman's language, came through. And after I got into the church and went up and got on the dais, lightning struck the transformer across the street, and the church went dark. It's black. No lights. Except for the kind of strobe lighting effect from an occasional lightning bolt striking nearby. Well, I'm a Baptist preacher, and I know how to preach through difficult circumstances, because in most churches, if the ladies don't like what you're saying, they'll pinch the babies and get them to squall, and you just keep on preaching. You just don't let that slow you down. So I kept on preaching. The problem was, I couldn't see my notes. I needed notes for Ephesians. I didn't need notes for the gospel, but they had read the scriptures. I was going to have to continue there, and so I couldn't see my notes, and they found 2 coal oil lanterns, or kerosene lamps, actually, and brought them up on either. So the audience could see me, but I couldn't see them. The light dissipated too soon. In a small church. But I knew that the lights were coming on. Not because Jesus told me, because he didn't have any words of advice at this point. I'm on my own. I had passed the East Texas utility truck on my way in the door. And I knew that whatever we were doing in there, that guy was out twisting wires to make the lights come back on. So what I decided to do is use Ephesians generally and make a metaphor of what's going on. And it was real dramatic, because every once in a while, at unusually timed moments, the lightning would strike, and there would be the strobe lights through the simple stained. I'm not talking about stained glass windows with Jesus and angels. I'm talking about colored glass. But it became a staccato effect, kind of struck like a disco palace. And here I am preaching in this environment, and I'm just preaching, I'm getting into it, I'm enjoying it, throwing myself out there, and it's you could come to the light and be saved, and then you wander off. But you'll be back to the light. And you'll be loved and accepted when that happens. Kind of the backsliders sermon. And that went on, and a good homily is about 20 minutes. In church time, that's all those people can stand, actually. Because they don't get rebuttal time like you're going to get tonight. That's the good part. Y'all got to be practicing your life. Rebuttal time. And ultimately the lights do come on. I've run about 38 minutes, which is long. And the fluorescent lights were wired serially. So electricity came to that one in the back of the church, and it went blink, 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 stayed on. And then the next one went blink, 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 and stayed on. And then the next one went blink, blink. Light marched to the podium, pulpit, where I was preaching. And the place was a mess. Most of those folding chairs were on the floor. People were climbing over them, falling over them. Pews were out of angle. There was an empty wheelchair over here. I knew who that belonged to. It belonged to Miss Starling. She had 20 years before played the piano in that church, but she had that kind of arthritis where her fingers were bent off at angles, and she had big growths on her knuckles. And that was her wheelchair, but she wasn't in it. She was in the back of the room with the young man, and they were praising the Lord and waving their arms around. He led her to the piano, and she began to play the piano. The place was crazy. It was the guy that I had met earlier in the week, had a goiter down on his chest. There he was. He had his neck back. There was no border there. It was a man that hadn't been able to speak. They told me for 8 years, and he was praising the Lord in a loud voice, and his wife was trying to get him to shut up. It was, people were cured of maladies, like in a Pentecostal revival. Now, I had been to Pentecostal revival. Why would I do that? Because all this time I was a Baptist minister, my gay feelings would not go away. But I kept praying for them to go away. And I wasn't getting healed. So if that ain't working in the Baptist church, let's go check out and see what the Pentecostals are doing about that. And I went over there and said, this is phony shit. This ain't real. I mean, people that didn't look sick were healed of things you wouldn't have known they had. I mean, what's with that, you know? Baptists don't put any faith in faith healers. We never met a faith healer in their life who didn't have false teeth and wear glasses. What's up with that? All right? So, what we did was, that scared me to death. I didn't believe this could happen. But it did happen. In my empirical experience in a church service that I was conducting. That was against my theology. The trouble with being 17 is you're 17. And if something don't fit, how do you deal with that? And so while everybody else was just joyous, I was getting depressed. And so I went back to my hotel room. I called my handlers, and I said, I can't go on. Well, they've got money in this too. They're getting paid. So they leave Pasadena in a 54 Chevrolet two-door, and they come to Woodville, Texas, the hotel where I'm staying, to convince me that I have to continue, because I don't understand. I'm confused, and I'm pissed off. And damn it, you heal them, you won't heal me. I tricked the night before with the hotel clerk. He was a fine young man, and he wanted some more, and I was all in favor of that. So I said, okay, I'll fake it. All I've got is Saturday Bible study and Sunday John 3:16 service. I can do that in my sleep. What I didn't know was there was a reporter there, and a screaming headline in the Beaumont newspaper was healing service by young Baptist evangelists. And the wire services picked it up. So by Sunday morning, there were 20,000 people in Coleman Hill, Texas, to hear me preach. And I preached. More people joined that church that day than in its entire history. That pastor would be collecting sucker money off of them people for decades. They built a whole new church building out of that service. And I made $30,000 in the collection plate. And I went to the old family farm in Leon County, not far from Flo, Texas, where we had a trailer house and a good well. And I went up there with a bag of money and a lot of confusion. And I started praying, but it's like nobody was answering the phone. In my true belief of what I was doing, that had never happened before. I'd always felt that I had some guidance. But I wasn't getting nothing. I mean, nothing. It was a dead line. It's like going out here and talking to a tombstone. You ain't going to get a lot of feedback on it. And I had plenty of money. I had a bunch of money in the bank. Plus I had $30,000 from that, cash money. And then I looked at the money. And that's what bothered me most. Every bill in that satchel was crumpled and old. It had been clutched very tightly by the poor farm community people in Coleman Hill, Texas. They needed that money for their children's health care. They needed that money to care for their elderly parents and grandparents. They needed that money to buy seed for next year's crop. Those people worked very hard for that money. It was precious money. It was old money. It was crumpled money. And I blew into town, put on a goddamn show, and left with more money than any of those people will see in several years. That's dirty business. But I still had all these conflicts. So I moved to Coleman Hill, Texas. I rented a house for, get this, $60 a month. 2 acres of land, house, 2 bedrooms and a garage. Furnished. $60. And I went to that church the next Sunday. It was packed, full of people, new members. The pastor asked me if I wanted to preach. No. Asked me if I would do the closing prayer. I did. Short, sweet, and point. Get out of here. The next week when I went back, Miss Starley was back in the wheelchair. The guy with the goiter was coming back. People who had thrown their canes and their walkers away needed to get new ones. People that were cured of dying of cancer did, in fact, die of cancer. It wasn't real. And that's the second theological body slam in 3 weeks. The trouble with being 17 is you're 17. I decided what was good about all of that was the simple faith of those people. And what had actually happened in that emotional moment in that church in Coleman Hill, Texas, is a good-looking young preacher with a fine voice, staccato lighting, that they had never experienced before, had caused them to forget whatever it was they felt guilty about, because it was their guilt that had brought on their maladies. And when they forgot their guilt, the maladies seemed to go away. And if they perceived it, that's what they projected. But 2 weeks later, I mean, what do simple country folk have to feel guilty about? Stealing someone else's chicken when you're hungry? I don't know. But they felt guilty about something, and it was the guilt that brought them back. And when the guilt returned, so did the maladies. In my screenplay, I project from that scene in Colemanville, Texas, to going to a Unitarian church and talking to people and telling them what is really evil in this world, really and truly evil in this world, has nothing to do with what you believe or don't believe. What is evil in this world is guilt. And if you're going to do something in your life and you're going to feel guilty about it, just don't fucking do it. Don't. It's not worth it. If you're going to feel guilty about being gay, then suffer the decision of denying yourself and be straight. That's what Jerry Falwell did. And if you ever walk behind Jerry Falwell, if I had a swing like that in my backyard, all the kids would play there. And I noticed that when I was to confront him, and I said, "My God, Jerry, do you know how you walk?" And boy, he got tight-ass, which made it worse. Poor devil. The Jerry Falwell knows for sure that being gay is a choice, because he had to make one and he made the wrong one. That's why he's so miserable and trying to imply that on us. But guilt is evil. And we live in a society that they don't play guilt on the margins. The guilt is the mainstream. I mean, look at what's going on right now. Where somebody goes in and kills kids. Kills innocent kids. He's dead too, so he's got no guilt to live with. But we as a nation assimilate that guilt. And we react to it through that assimilation. We are yanked around not by religious rings in their nose, but by guilt rings in their nose. My name is Ray Hill. I didn't do anything today to feel guilty for. I appreciate your coming here, and the floor will be open for questions.
Now we'll take some questions. We're actually filming this, so if you don't want to be on camera, just wave your hand, and the cameraman won't put you on camera. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody?
Ray?
Yes.
You made some comment about the shooting on the East Coast.
Yeah.
If one of those teachers.
No, I don't want to go there. I don't want.
Armed?
The answer to guns is not more guns. That's like saying the answer to guilt is more guilt. And I ain't going there. And let me tell you, let me give you an example. On the United States military base, where they've got guns stacked in places where other places don't even have places, some nut walked in there and mowed them down.
Yep, that's a fact.
And they're in. So more guns is not the solution. That is a fine example.
No, it's because the people on that military post can't carry guns.
But they have access to them.
No, sir, they do not. They're all locked up by ex-military. You can't get to. If you're on that.
Don't tell me that they're not MPs crawling all over everywhere with weapons. I have been on military bases.
There's a few MPs around, but having something, it's not like having a private citizen arm.
Now, Louis, you and I have known one another more than 30 years.
Yes, that's a fact.
And you know that I'm a convicted felon. I can never have a gun.
That's a fact.
I've got a little card in my front window that says there is no guns in this house.
Yes.
I'm proud that there is no guns in this house.
Yes.
And there are people in my apartment complex that are dealing drugs because they live on the low side, and there's guns everywhere. But I don't want guns in my house, even if I could legally have them. I understand you feel differently, but my man card has not expired.
Well, I think about the story that was on the internet a while back of the young lady who was a waitress in a restaurant, and on a Friday night she was standing in the bus
stop with her cash tips and her cash paycheck. She had her hand.
I saw that story. And that's one good story. And the purse was gone, but she still had the gun, so she used it.
Yeah.
And the judge shot him in the back, and she got away with it. But actually, it's illegal to shoot a fleeing person.
Yeah, I have zero sympathy for thieves.
Okay. But they should have shot me when I was burglarized.
Probably true, probably true.
Any other questions?
If I'd have done that, it'd been a great loss to society, because you're one of the funniest people I know.
Any challenges?
Just briefly, you know, there were several court cases where you took the police to court, and 4 of them, right?
4 of them. Number 5 is in the
works.
It's in the works.
Can you just tell me a little bit about?
Well, the first time I was arrested after I got out of prison, I was in the basement of the courthouse covering a trial of a raid on Mary's. I knew everybody. I knew Thad Wilson, the judge. I knew the prosecutor, Belot. I knew all the defendants that I was there to support. I didn't know any member of the jury. And I knew the 2 cops that were sitting in the courtroom. One was J.S. Kroll, and the other one, I didn't know, but I knew he was a TSU cop. And so I'm there, and as the state is calling their witnesses, when the defense lawyer started calling his witnesses, and they moved to the front, the 2 cops, in full view of the jury, the judge playing like he was asleep, slab of ham laying up there, started doing the limp wrist. They were ridiculing the defense witnesses. So I decided as a journalist that was my story. The outcome of the trial was not as important as covering these cops acting like shit in a trial. So I went over and I got the 2nd cop's name, and I went out in the hall, and when I got in the hall, J.S. Kroll followed me out there, and he said, "Raymond, let me see your driver's license." And I said, "Kroll, I don't need a driver's license in the basement of this courthouse." And it was up against the wall, Mother, and there was a bunch of other cops came in, they shook me down and handcuffed me and carried me off to jail. Well, Judge Sam Alfano, who wasn't the judge in that court, but court 2, that was coming back from lunch in the car, and the KTRH reporter said Ray Hill was arrested in the basement of the courthouse. So Sam came back and called the jailer and said, "You got Ray Hill over there?" And the jailer said, "Yeah, he's standing here next to me." I wasn't listening to him talk to the judge. He said, "Well, bring him over here and I'll cut him loose on his own recognizance, and we'll go to trial and see what this is all about later." So then the jailer turned to me and said, "You hear the drunks back there. I can't spare an officer escort. Opened the door and let me out in the hall on the civilian side and said, 'Go to Sam's court.' So I went down and went to Sam's court. Walked in the back of Sam's court. Sam said, "I thought you were under arrest." I said, "I am." He said, "Well, where's your officer?" I said, "They didn't give me one." Then he started lecturing me about what their job was. And I said, "Judge, I don't have any decisions to make here. I'm doing what you tell me." The man said, "Come here, I'm here." And he said, "Well, do you have anything over there?" I said, "Yeah, my shoelaces, my belt, my wallet, my money, pocket change, everything's over there, my wallet." He said, "Well, go back over there." And then I realized, wait a minute, if you're supposed to be in jail, but you're not, how the hell do you get back in jail? There's some problems here. I mean, this was not well thought out. And so I go back over there, but from when they first carried me over there, you get your picture taken. Coming into jail, click, there's a clock up there. And then they process me out, and as I'm leaving, they take another picture, click, and there's a clock. I'm in jail an hour and 40 minutes. So we go to trial in Thad Wilson's court. Not Thad Wilson was that judge. We go to trial in Judge Green's court. And Judge Green listened to all this, and he said, "I don't believe I need a driver's license in the basement of the courthouse. I don't know why Mr. Hill would need a driver's license in the basement of the courthouse either. I'm going to dismiss this case." I was representing myself. but I had 3 lawyers at the table. Mike Maness and a couple others. Mike and I went over to federal court and we sued for damages for my being falsely arrested under the ordinance. And so in federal court, Judge O'Connor listened to all the testimony, including the acting police chief, who was Tommy Mitchell, testified in that federal courtroom. We have to know who we're dealing with, even if you tattoo numbers on them. Well, that didn't go over real well to the Jewish jurors in that case. And so Judge O'Connor just said, this is a lost cause. He withdrew and said, I've already decided I'm not going to let the jury consider this. There's no law here in violation. All we need to decide is how much to settle up with Mr. Hill. And Mike Maness jumped up and said, $5,000 will be adequate, Your Honor. And I said, plus lawyer's fees, Your Honor. And the judge laughed and said he would buy all of that. So I got my lawyers paid separately. I got paid $5,000. Now you amortize that over an hour and 40 minutes. That's 100 minutes. That's $50 a minute. Now if you hear that I have been arrested, do not bail me out. I'm getting paid $50 a minute. I promise you I'm not going to violate any laws to get arrested for, so it's bullshit, and all I have to do is prove in federal court that it's bullshit, and I get $50 a minute. Do not try to get me out of jail. Now, I don't know what your rate is, but the circumstances that determined my rate is probably not true in your case. Other times I've been arrested, it's been always for calling cops motherfuckers. I call cops motherfuckers at the drop of a hat. I was arrested recently at, what's the name of the place? The strip club out on Westheimer. Treasure. I went on Treasure. I wasn't in there looking for women. I can promise you that. Maybe their boyfriends, they hang out at my house anyway. At least that's what the women think. I was out there because I heard the place was being raided, and I went in. And I was in the building a total of 46 seconds. From crossing the threshold, having a conversation with the doorman, having a conversation with a cop who started shoving me, and I was attacked and handcuffed from behind by 2 other cops. Now, when they got back to the police station, the police chief had come in from home to say, why the fuck did you arrest Ray Hill? Because that never works out. We train you. We tell you if Ray Hill shows up, just leave. He's got better lawyers than we have, and there is no way this is going to work out. And they said, oh, we had to arrest him because, you see, it was a public safety issue. And Chief McClellan said, a 72-year-old crippled man, a public safety issue? Ray Hill? A public safety? Oh yeah, he was like a wild man. He was swinging his arms. He was hitting customers. He was hitting employees. He hit me and 2 other cops, and yada, yada, yada. He said, fill out your offense reports. And so they sat down and they filled out their offense report. They had me in the building for 15 minutes. I run in and I run through the security, and I went back there and I started screaming and slapping at people and all of that. And I had a videotape of the 46 seconds that I was in the place. So they filed their papers, and when their papers went to the intake division of the Harris County District Attorney's Office, my attorney, Stan Snyder, was sitting in that office when they came over the internet, and he said, give me those copies. We have their offense reports. They now have the videotape. They can't put them motherfuckers on the stage. What I did is I turned to the little Hispanic cop and I called him motherfucker. That's all I did. And he started shoving. It's a magic word. cops do stupid things if you talk about the mother. I won't analyze that, but I do know that in my Supreme Court case, Hill versus Houston, 107, Supreme Court Reporter, 2502, got a card with a sign on it. I was arrested for calling two cops motherfuckers, intentionally interrupting their beating a young man in my front lawn. That case went all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States, whereupon 8 of the 9 justices, all justices save Rehnquist, said they thought everybody knew about cops and they mamas, didn't know what I got arrested. I got paid my usual fee, and my lawyers made $650,000 for defending my rights all the way to the Supreme Court of the United States. If you have rights and you do not defend them, you have no rights. It's simple. And if you are afraid to go to jail, they already have you under control because your fears will control you. I will go, it's in the Supreme Court case. If you get it and read it, it's the first footnote that was put into the Supreme Court decision by Justice Brennan writing for them. It said, Mr. Hill said that he would rather get arrested than somebody whose family wouldn't understand, that he would rather get arrested than somebody who couldn't afford to spend a lot of time in jail, that he would rather get arrested for somebody who was unable to stand up for their rights. And I will do anything non-violent and non-aggressive when I see police misbehaving under any circumstances, in any place, at any time. And that's still my axiom. Of course, at 72 years old, rough handling with handcuffs, injurious, but I'll sue for that. I may have pains in my wrist because it aggravated my arthritis, but I'll get paid for that. You taxpayers will pay for that. If you don't know who I am, I'm the old man of the gay movement. How many people like your mayor? We have a show of hands. I didn't say you don't have problems with her. I have problems with her. How many of you like this gentleman? You're welcome. I raised her. She and I don't always agree, but she and I don't have any problems either because I talk straightforward to her. She doesn't control the police department. How many of you have had a bad incident with Houston Police Department? How many of you who had bad incident wound up suing their ass? Call me next time. My telephone number is 713, that's Houston, 523, that's Montrose, 6969, you can't forget it. And the reason I have that telephone number is people can remember it even under the stress of being booked into jail. My machine will accept your collect call so that I know what's going on. Tell me what's going on. I love Houston. Houston was built by some of the most independent-minded people on the planet. Sam Houston was a character. He was a stand-up comedian as well as a very effective politician. He was probably working for the CIA and came down here to steal Texas from Mexico, but who cares? They're taking it back over by population growth alone. It's going to happen. When they tell me they want to speak English only here, I remind them that's not our native tongue in Texas. Actually, it's some Karankawan language, but we'll settle for Mexico because they spoke it for several hundred years before English got here. I do unpopular things. Because my labor goon parents, I rub the cat hair the wrong direction in most cases. Ever since I gave up preaching, I have been completely out of the closet about being an atheist. And someone mentioned tonight that they knew about my sobriety stuff, and they thought that that interfered with my atheism. No, Jesus doesn't keep me from drinking and drugging. I probably don't drink what he likes anyway, and he damn sure ain't paying for it. Poverty keeps me from drinking and drugging. Listen, I've had a wonderful time tonight. I appreciate you all for coming. I am available to discuss issues with you, and you've got my telephone number now, and I promise you, you will remember it in the morning when you wake up. Thank you very much.
Mr. Rahill, thank you so much.